global program on the protection of vulnerable targets. Before we begin, just a couple of quick housekeeping matters. Please keep off your microphones and your cameras until you're called on to take the floor if you have questions. This session will be recorded with the intention of posting it on CTED's website. So just keep that in mind. Bathrooms are just down the hall for those who are joining us in the room, and we will have quite a bit of time at the end for question and answers, and we'll talk you through that, but we'll be using the raise hand function online, and we'll be raising our actual hand in the room. So now I'll hand over to today's host. I hand the floor to Jean-Philippe Morange, who is the head of the Border Management and Law Enforcement section at CTED.
Thank you, Rachel, and good afternoon, colleagues. First of all, colleagues in the room, with this beautiful weather in New York, rainy day, but also to all colleagues online who join us today. It's an important meeting, and it's a pleasure to have all the speakers we have today about two key resolutions adopted in 2017 in the context of the foreign terrorist fighters. And at that time, you might remember how important the protection of critical infrastructure, but also with Resolution 2396, the importance of protecting also soft targets. And this has become an important element in the CTED works, in the CTC assessment, in our analysis, dialogue with all member states. In addition to these key, I would say, references, we also developed a Security Council addendum to the 2015 Guiding Principle on Foreign Terrorist Fighters, Madrid Guiding Principles, in which you will find all the elements related to critical infrastructures and soft targets. This addendum was adopted in 2018. Also, we had a revision of the United Nations Compendium of, on Good Practices on the protection of critical infrastructure against terrorist attack. This is a very useful document full of different detailed elements that will help you as member states in the implementation of these difficult provisions. Of course, we have noticed an increased interest by member states to protect their critical infrastructures, their soft target, while terrorists still look after opportunities. Their interest never stops. In addition to this traditional element, we have noticed development of advanced methods of terrorist attack. You are all aware of the work we are doing on the new technologies, and of course we have developed, as you might remember, an interesting work on unmanned aircraft systems against vulnerable targets. I want to say that the capacity building program that we are going to present today has been built upon the CTC work, the CTED visit, our recommendation. This is critical in any OCT capacity building program. And the second point is the beneficiary states, and you will hear who receive assistance, were all volunteers. And I think if you keep in mind these two elements, then there's no confusion possible with any other work from the CT entities. So we're going to hear several presentations. First, CTED, of course, will expose an overview of existing recommendations in this area, because we have now compiled a lot of precise elements into that. The mandate of CTED on the facilitation of the technical assistance. And following that, we will hear our partners. Firstly, of course, the UN Office of Counterterrorism and our dear friends and colleagues, Ignacio Ibanez, that will present this program in a more detailed manner. So I'm happy now to hand over the floor to my colleague Maria Sesma, legal officer in CTED in our team border management workforce. Maria.
Thank you very much, and a very good afternoon for all here in the room and online. Indeed, I will give a very quick overview of the status of recommendations in the area of vulnerable targets, and that will indeed lead and set the scene for the example we are presenting today of the capacity building of vulnerable targets. Okay, while we wait for the slides to come up and work. Okay, so we'll start from the year 2017. The two resolutions that Jean-Philippe just presented.
Go back to the beginning.
Yeah. Here. One more. Yeah. Here we go. Between 2017, which was the year that both resolutions 2341 and 2396 were adopted by Security Council, CTED held a dialogue with member states and conducted 85 country assessment visits to 77 member states on behalf of the Counterterrorism Committee. Now, the regional distribution of these visits was around 26% in the Americas, Asia, and Pacific, 41% in Europe, Middle East, and Central Asia, and 23% in Africa. These here are the three main categories that countries face challenges, which is still the case today. So first, a few words on the strategic frameworks. Nearly half of the visited states were having main challenges in the lack of formal strategies or framework for critical infrastructure protection. And this is one of those provisions from the Council Resolution 2341. Also, challenges in terms of establishing national action plans and policies that are in line with the UN Security Council resolutions. Also, development of comprehensive frameworks that would encompass counterterrorism measures integrating critical infrastructure protection and also physical and cyber threats. The second category of challenges relate to institutional coordination and stakeholder engagement. This was around a third of the visited states that face challenges, especially in the need for coordination among government agencies that have responsibilities or tasks in protecting critical infrastructure and soft targets. This also includes engagement with a wider stakeholder community, including private sector. Enhancing also stakeholder engagement in planning and implementation of measures to protect vulnerable targets. This is, of course, very important in the sense of designing measures that relate to protecting sites that could be owned or operated by private sector actors or non-governmental agencies. The third area is more on the operational preparedness and risk mitigation. Around those visited countries, around 20 CTED identified main challenges in insufficient risk assessment and emergency response planning. There was also a need to look into cybersecurity integration and incident response mechanisms. This is one of those areas that has certainly had progress since 2017, and we see much more emphasis on protecting cyber networks, for example, as designated critical infrastructure of states. However, still challenges improving the resilience of cyber networks, but also the interrelation of physical and cyber protection. Then a little bit more specifically on the technical assistance needs. So the challenges I just described in those main categories are not necessarily always the case that states would benefit from technical assistance. So CTED's recommendations are different in that sense that recommendations that suggest improvements or progress could also be something that some of the visited states can implement and improve within their existing capabilities and resources. Then the category indeed, which is of importance, is the CTED identified needs for assistance. And these focus on several recurring themes. And these are areas where the committee has explicitly recognized that the visited states would benefit from assistance in implementation, or the visited state also expressed the need and interest to receive assistance. So the first three categories that you see here are especially essential in establishing the foundation for vulnerable target protection, being policy or strategy, also supporting understanding and prioritizing the threat and developing risk mitigation measures that responds to those identified threats, and partnerships, including with the private sector. The last two categories, capacity building, training, surveillance, technology, suggest the need for assistance in the operational level, from specialized training to equipment and technologies to support security and protective measures. So the idea here is, of course, that what we look into is that there's a foundational structure to support the operational. So as you will see later, that also the capacity building programs are designed in a similar manner, that they follow this pillar thinking that states would first have policy strategy, sometimes need for legal amendments or establishing legal frameworks, followed by institutional setting, which would also include the partnerships and stakeholders, but also interagency cooperation and coordination. And lastly would be the operational and technical readiness that is then built upon that foundational structure. This just very to illustrate an overview of the distribution of type of assistance needs by region. So we see that policy development appears in majority of the regions, most prevalent in the African continent. The need for training appears often, followed also by program development and need for equipment. But very much here it illustrates the top, let's say, top 6 types of assistance that are most often identified in CTED assessments that states would benefit. So you see indeed policy development, training, equipment, but also cooperation. It could be regional, international, and that includes information exchange. So the states have access to information to actually build their threat assessments. What are the emerging threats also against vulnerable targets? And very often regionally, neighboring countries often have a common threat scenario or common threat landscape. So then just a few words on the facilitation of technical assistance. So in addition to CTED's core mandate in conducting the country assessment on the committee's behalf, what does this mandate of ours mean, facilitating technical assistance? So the committee and CTED are not assistance providers. This is where our partnerships step in. The recommendation that I just illustrated and identified needs for assistance deriving from committee's assessments serve as a compass or a trigger for designing and planning capacity building programs by our partners, such as the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism, which is our main closest partner entity, to also other UN and international organizations. So this process then ensures that the capacity building programs respond to actual needs of the beneficiaries, are more targeted, but also align with Security Council resolution on counterterrorism, as well as other instruments, international instruments such as the Global Counterterrorism Strategy, relevant conventions and protocol in counterterrorism, and lastly, the UN Global Counterterrorism Coordination Compact, which serves as a platform for CTED to share these recommendations with all compact entities and their focal points. And then, very last slide. So CTED indeed is a proud partner of the UNOCT-led global program on protection of vulnerable targets since its launch in 2021, that you will hear more about in the next presentation. Through this program activities, we have witnessed that the successful elements for member states to achieve a comprehensive approach to vulnerable target protection is implemented through the pillars that I mentioned earlier. So legislative, regulatory, institutional, and operational and technical frameworks. CTED's role in this program is to lead the capacity consultation component of missions with the beneficiary states. Based on these missions findings, the project team then prepares a roadmap or a national action plan, we could call it too, which now consists of conclusions and recommended guidelines for implementation for the beneficiary states, and also conclusion on the state's current capability to protect vulnerable targets. And the roadmap is then submitted to the state for further action. It also includes some parameters of high importance, medium importance for action. Now, a very important question that sometimes is, how is this different from CTED's assessments? Now, our assessments often are very time intensive. What means is that particular thematic areas, we cannot spend days in going in more depth. These capacity consultations under the global program allows us to now focus on one particular thematic area and obviously go much deeper in understanding the beneficiary state's current capacity and what are their needs in a much detailed manner. The roadmaps that then are indeed submitted to the member state, and with the idea that they will have ownership, they can turn it into national action plans, but also it is informative for additional donors. So obviously we cannot necessarily always say that we can deliver capacity building in all of the areas that these roadmaps suggest. However, for future purposes, it allows sort of a guide also that where further assistance or resources become available, it gives a step-by-step sort of a map of what needs to be done. So these are the results of the capacity consultations. And here I already want to, of course, thank the UNOCT team in Madrid, that we have excellent partnerships, and this is truly a demonstration of not only the close partnerships, but really how the cycle from CTED assessments flow into the UN system and all the way to the capacity consultations, turning the assessments into action. So I will stop there, turn back to the moderator, and look forward to our partner indeed to elaborate more on this important program.
Thank you very much, Anne-Maria, for underlining, reminding everybody about the mandate role of each entity, starting by the Counterterrorism Committee Executive Directorate, the sequences of action. I think it's very important. and how we complete each other, how we work together as one UN. It's the wording, the language we use, and it brings a coherence of the counterterrorism architecture. And in future, we'll probably replicate that sort of briefing on a different program, for example, the counterterrorism travel program, and you will find again this fundamental first element that the national consultation represents. I would even say it assists to even structure capacity building action, because the recommendation, or at least the priorities we identify, come naturally. So having said that, I'm very happy now to turn my head to the head of the Madrid program office, the head of this program, the coordinator of the Vulnerable Target Program, Special Project and Innovation Branch of the UN Office of Counterterrorism, our colleague and dear friend Ignacio Ibanez. Ignacio, are you online?
I am. Thank you, Jean-Philippe.
So you have the floor, Ignacio. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jean-Philippe. And it's a real pleasure and an honor to be with you. I hope I will not bore you too much. I will try to make it as entertaining as possible, because I know normally these presentations, especially on hybrid mode, are a bit heavy on us, on all of us. But I do think that our dear colleagues and friends from CTED actually did most of the heavy lifting, because they explained to you very well, both Jean-Philippe and Maria, why vulnerable targets protection is important. So in my slides, and I promise you it will not be a long presentation, I will try to actually complement what Anne-Maria and Jean-Philippe said on giving you an overview of the. So I hope you can see my screen and the presentation. Otherwise, please just interrupt me, colleagues. There we go. So Jean-Philippe was just mentioning that we work as one UN, and I think this program, the full name of the program is the Global Program on Countering Terrorist Threats Against Vulnerable Targets. I think this program is actually a very good example of us working as one UN in a coherent manner, in a methodological manner, and I will explain why I'm saying this in a moment, and actually adding the value added of the different UN entities and the expertise of the different UN entities to give the best product to our beneficiary member states. So you see there at the top of the screen that really this program, although UNOCT leads the coordination of the program, but it's a joint effort with our partners of CTED, of the UN Alliance of Civilizations. You know that the Alliance of Civilizations has a lot of expertise on the protection of religious sites, for example. Our colleagues of UNIQUI, the Crime Research Institute in Turin, you know that they have a lot of experience, for example, on tourism security, on crowd management, on major events. And in addition to these program partners, this is how we call them, we call ourselves, we have a very close relationship with Interpol, who also works very much on vulnerable targets, both on the critical infrastructure side and on the public places, soft targets side. So I was saying that CTED did, my colleagues from CTED did the heavy lifting, explain to you what the legal framework is, you know, in terms of the Security Council resolutions, 2341, 2396, the 2018 addendum to the guiding principles, especially principles 50 and 51 are most relevant to vulnerable targets protection. And of course, their own assessments, you know, and I think Anne-Maria also was very good in indicating, you know, according to CTED's assessments, how they see the main areas where vulnerable targets protection needs to focus. And you will see in a moment in the different pillars of our work that we very much try to respond as a joint program through the delivery of technical assistance and capacity building to those priority areas that the CTED needs assessment indicate. Just a point on nomenclature, on the concept of vulnerable targets. I know most of you, especially you, dear delegates, are very much aware of where these vulnerable targets comes from. But I would just say it because sometimes, you know, it leads to different interpretations. I know in some countries, terminology also varies. So I want to make clear in the UN General Assembly Global Counterterrorism Strategy, since 2006, this reference to vulnerable targets is included, but it was through the 7th Review Resolution of the General Assembly and the 8th Review Resolution of 2023, where there were more, let's say, substantive paragraphs on vulnerable targets protection and what it meant and what it encompassed. So you see there, just, you know, to be clear, from the get-go, vulnerable targets includes both critical infrastructure and public places soft targets protection. You have some pictures there of what we understand by critical infrastructure in most countries. We're talking about energy, transport, we're talking about health, we're talking about food, we're talking about water, those kinds of infrastructures. And public places of targets, we're talking about urban centers, tourism, education institutions, all kinds of crowd gatherings in recreational venues, in sport venues, etc. Right? And you have there actually in the resolution a non-clausus list and not a limiting list, but a list of examples of what it's understood by the General Assembly that public places and soft targets encompasses. And you see there religious sites, education institutions, etc. So what's the goal of the program? This program was created in mid-2021, although the actual implementation mostly started in 2022. It actually started, I have to say, with a briefing to the CTC to explain the launching of this program and what it encompassed. It has evolved somehow. Right now, the goal of the program, as you see there, is to strengthen member states' capacity to prevent, protect, mitigate, investigate, respond to, and recover from terrorist attacks against vulnerable targets at the national, regional, and global levels in a human rights compliant and gender responsive way. This is the main goal of the program. That language of preventing, protecting, mitigating, investigating, responding to, recovering from, it's actually resolution language. So we wanted to make sure that the way in which we support member states is exactly the way in which member states have indicated that they want to be supported in these resolutions. So you see there at the bottom that the program has 4 programmatic pillars. We develop knowledge tools. We provide technical assistance and capacity building to our beneficiary countries. We connect experts from around the world, and we develop specialized projects on different areas of vulnerable targets protection. And let me give you some more information about those 4 pillars. But before I do that, because I know that this is, also a group in which the border security management component is very much present and it's important. We're talking about border security management, but also law enforcement, whereas vulnerable targets will form more under the law enforcement category. But I wanted to actually give you some examples of where these 2 areas of vulnerable targets and border security management actually come together, which I think is quite relevant to this briefing. So I mentioned there some critical infrastructures that clearly have a connection on border security management. On the port and maritime security, we're talking about ports, of course, that's already a critical infrastructure. Think about, the trade chain, okay, around the world. But we're also talking about underwater cabling, internet, okay? We're talking about energy, offshore platforms, and even offshore platforms and their pipelines that go into the ports and then into inland. In the area of aviation security, we do not deal under the Vulnerable Targets Protection Program with what happens from, let's say, the counters and the security gates at airports inside, but outside, think about, for example, transportation hubs, that take you to the airport and outside of the airport. So the surrounding area of airports, of course, and the connection with transportation is very important in the area of vulnerable targets. In the area of transportation hubs in general, the connection of urban centers, ports of entry to any country, for example, connecting with the capital, with any city, okay? Transnational energy infrastructure, I mentioned pipelines, cyber, of course, and I will explain to you in a minute, but of course, all these critical infrastructures are very much connected to information and communication technologies that actually provide the software that help them run those systems, used in critical infrastructure could also be the target of terrorist attacks and are often the target of malicious actors. And there are also soft targets, not only critical infrastructure, but also soft targets in border areas. I'm talking about national parks. We work a lot with African member states, and we know, that this is an area of concern. Terrorist groups or individuals that may infiltrate in national parks, close normally to some border areas, or markets in villages that are also in those border areas. Of course, tourist and recreational venues. And then there's also something that Anne-Maria mentioned about risk assessment and risk management, including threat, of course, assessment. This is a point that is fundamental on vulnerable targets, and it's really cross-cutting across not only border security management, but also other areas that are of interest in the counterterrorism field. And I know both Jean-Philippe and Maria have been working very much on this, and it's a very important topic. On the vulnerable target side, I will tell you, this is also something that we hear from member states. It's important, risk assessment methodologies, because if you do not have a very good risk assessment methodology, you will not be able to identify those critical infrastructures and public places that need to be protected. And if you cannot identify and have a list of these critical infrastructure and public places in your country, it's very difficult to assign, to allocate resources, whether it be human resources from a law enforcement point of view, or financial resources also to cover protection measures or resilient measures in those infrastructures. So that is really, these assessments, risk assessments, are really at the base. And of course, new technologies that are fundamental and also cross-cutting matter. The threat that, for example, the UAS can present from a terrorist point of view, using a UAS against a critical infrastructure or against a crowd, for example, is quite could be quite attractive. Countering those UAS measures are also, of course, important, as are new ICT measures, new technologies, for example, that will help us protect the cyber systems. So going into the program, here I just wanted to give you a snapshot of the results of the program. Really, over the last 4 years, we have produced, as you can see, 12 knowledge tools, so 12 technical guides, even learning course, deliver more than 120 activities, both in person and online, engaging more than 4,500 participants. We developed 10 roadmaps, national action plans, and my colleagues from CTED mentioned these. You can see there are beneficiary countries. We created a global network of experts. We expanded also the pool of funding partners to the program. The founding with OU, spelled OU, founding partner of the program was the state of Qatar, but 5 other member states decided to fund with a U the program, really showing the confidence that they have in the program and what we are doing. So in the previous slide, you saw that these 6 funding partners today are France, Qatar, Spain, the Russian Federation, Turkmenistan, and the United States of America. You can see also that we have in-kind support from other countries that have been extremely useful in terms of their expertise or hosting, for example, study visits. I mentioned there the very good cooperation with Italy and Germany over the past year in this regard, but there are many other countries that are generously supporting with expertise and with their experts the program. And we have developed very good partnership with international and regional organizations, CSOs, civil society, the private sector, academia, all of them very important stakeholders to protect both the public space sphere and the critical infrastructure sphere. So here I will just give you a few examples of what we do under the 4 pillars of the program, what we have been doing. We have developed technical guides. Here you have 5 technical guides that we developed in partnership with the state of Qatar. On the public places side, urban centers, tourism, religious sites, UAS. We have also developed the guide that Jean-Philippe was referring to before in very close partnership with CTED and Interpol in 2018 and then updated in 2022, also through a partnership with the state of Qatar, the compendium of on the protection of critical infrastructure against terrorist attacks. And just last year, in partnership with the Russian Federation and Turkmenistan, we developed a specific technical guide within the critical infrastructure umbrella, but on energy infrastructure, especially oil and gas infrastructure. Additionally, other knowledge tools that we have developed, we are very much going into developing specific, specialized training curricula for our beneficiary member states. So, for example, in a project in which we had the support of the United States of America, we work with Indonesia, Kenya, and Togo, developing training curricula that will serve as a basis, also with the development of the modules, including this in this curricula, for specific training programs, yearly programs that aim to be certified to actually expand the base of experts on vulnerable targets protection in one country, and also the base of trainers. And this we do also in collaboration with academic institutions. We already have the training curricula, and actually we are now entering the second phase of actually unfolding the curricula into modules and providing this training expertise. And I think it will be a very good foundation to increase the number of experts in beneficiary member states. Here you have the second pillar. Okay, I gave you a few examples on the first pillar, on the development of knowledge tools. By the way, I have to say that in addition, in those knowledge tools, we get the inputs and the contributions of a good number of UN entities from the Global Counterterrorist Coordination Compact, of course, from CTED and from our program partners, thus enriching really the products very much. Those products are actually, and the recommendations and good practices and tools included in those knowledge products actually contribute very much to the development of our technical assistance and capacity building. So on that very solid foundation, and thanks to the leadership of CTED, we have developed a very clear methodology, and Jean-Philippe and Maria explained, to actually go into member states that request the support of the program and hold in-depth consultations to identify their specific priorities and needs on vulnerable targets protection. Secondly, based on those priorities and needs, we develop those roadmaps, that's how we call them, so national action plans on the protection of vulnerable targets for that country on the 3 areas that Maria was mentioning, legal and regulatory, institutional and operational. And then thirdly, we implement specialized capacity building activities that respond to the identified needs and priorities in those roadmaps. Not only us, but also other partners that would like to contribute, to the implementation of these roadmaps, other international and regional organizations, or through bilateral engagements of these beneficiary member states with other countries. It's also possible to do it. So really a tool for the country that once we develop it, we give to them. They are the owners, the beneficiary countries are the owners of that roadmap, and then we support them in the implementation of the roadmap through specialized capacity building activities. Those activities, as you can see there, they have several modalities. We do specialized trainings, we do exercises, mostly tabletop exercises, so simulated exercises, study visits, I was referring to that before, and many other kinds of activities that will help implement those roadmaps. All of these, and I should say, not only this pillar of technical assistance and capacity building, even though especially under this pillar, but all of these pillars are actually results-based. So really, we look at, in UNOCT, at providing results. We have a methodology in-house in UNOCT about how we actually achieve results and how we monitor and evaluate the impact of our program. So this is also applied throughout the program, and specifically in this pillar. And as you were seeing before, if our goal also includes the consideration of gender matters and human rights matters, it also is a cross-cutting topic in our technical assistance and capacity building, fully mainstreamed in all our activities. You have there our beneficiary countries to date, and this has been mostly thanks to the partnership under this pillar with France, Qatar, Spain, and the United States. Here, I just wanted to give you an example, okay? I told you about the methodology. Here, it's a specific example of a project, and I wanted to bring this example forward because you can see it may seem like a lot of work and like a lot of things, but the funding is quite reasonable. You see that there, thanks to the general support of France, first a contribution in 2023 and then a contribution in 2024, so around $300,000 US to provide support to West African member states. We went and did this work in Benin, Cote d'Ivoire, and Senegal. We developed the roadmaps, we implemented capacity building activities, and we even kept it with a regional conference of experts of West African countries. All of these, and this is something I believe it's important also for you, esteemed delegates, we do in full coordination with the rest of the UN system. Here I mentioned specifically UN resident coordinators, but of course with other UN entities in the country. I remember, for example, in Senegal, our very close cooperation with UNODC and other entities that work in each of our countries, as well as other international regional organizations. For example, in this case, because we were talking about West Africa, we were, for example, implementing these activities also in cooperation with the African Union Counterterrorism Center. And of course, other UN entities and programs. So, for example, when our CTED travel colleagues, we have a topic that is in the roadmap of a country and is related to CTED travel, then of course we invite our colleagues from CTED travel. Or if it has to do, for example, with countering IEDs in vulnerable targets areas, so then we invite our global program, our UNOCT global program on weapons, which they have the expertise. So we try to leverage the expertise that we have in-house, and also that way be more efficient in the managing of the resources. So, okay, the third pillar, connecting experts across the world, I told you a little bit about it, but basically it's composed of public sector representatives, international regional organizations, civil society, academia, private, so all the stakeholders that could be affected in one of these vulnerable targets. Vulnerable targets is a wide umbrella, all critical infrastructure of public places. So we try to have a diversity of experts that come together. We do these online through expert briefings. We have already done more than 30 expert briefings on different topics of key interest and key trends in the area of vulnerable targets, both on the critical infrastructure and public places side. We have a global network, but also we are now creating regional groups, which just created in June a specific regional group for West African experts. And we also, of course, try to have in-person meetings. And we created a library of specialized vulnerable targets literature with different buckets of this area, these topics, that is available to our global network of experts online through our UNOCT Connect and Learn platform.
Ignacio, you're muted.
We lost you. Cannot hear you, Ignacio.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better.
Okay, apologies. So I was saying that I was going to, I'm about to finish, but I wanted to mention actually a little bit about the last pillar, which is the specialized programs or projects pillar. You saw there that we are now working on educational institutions, on religious sites, specifically developing projects that actually address these threats. You have all been following the news, sadly, these last few days, attacks on synagogues, attacks on prayer sites. So it's really a topic that is important. I'm talking about religious sites protection from a physical security standpoint. And we are doing the same also with other areas that we see are, member states are saying to us, this is important, okay? You have there also the tourism security. We are also working, of course, on critical energy infrastructure protection. So we are responding, really trying to respond in a dynamic way under that fourth pillar to what we hear from member states, what member states actually are requesting from us. So in terms of the way forward, and I promise this will be the last slide, what we're trying to do is really to engage more member states. I told you at the beginning that we have been quite successful in getting the support of some member states to become funding partners, but of course resources are limited, especially in these times. I will not repeat something that you all already know, but we do think that with very little investment, we can have a lot of impact. This is something very important for our program. I think we have already demonstrated that this is possible and that we are doing a good job in that regard. So I hope some of you will be also interested in becoming funding partners of the program. Of course, I also invite you to become beneficiaries. If you think that your country will benefit from our assistance, please let us know, because actually we very much look forward to working with you, always in terms of a partnership, okay? We learn from you, and hopefully some of what we can bring also stays with you in beneficiary countries, for the good of your country, for the protection of your citizens and your vulnerable targets, right? So you have there also another modality, which is what I was telling you before, in-kind support to the program through expertise. If any of your countries, is willing to support the program, you have quite good practices under law enforcement in public spaces, for example. Please let us know, because we would love to engage your experts, give visibility to your good practices in your countries, and engage at that expert level. So that's another way of collaborating with the program. All of these modalities of collaboration with the program, we do believe that will be even strengthened further next year. We are optimistic. And you can see there some of the things that we are preparing. We're developing a technical guide on public transport security, developing further addenda to the technical guide on critical energy infrastructure, delivering more capacity building, hopefully for new beneficiaries as well, implementing the training curriculum initiative, which I told you about. And here, for example, there are some countries, Australia being one of them, that is interested also in supporting and cooperating with us in that regard. A very interesting initiative that I also invite you to consider. We will keep developing more briefings for our global network of experts, the sub-regional groups, we will be developing those as well. And of course, in terms of the specific projects, as I was telling you before, the second phase of the critical energy infrastructure project at the regional level, how we can actually also raise awareness on the good practices that we have in our technical guide, the launch of our tourism security project together with UNIQUI and UN Tourism. This will happen in the next couple of months. We are also developing this project on educational institutions. I also invite you, if you have expertise or are interested, to reach out to us on this very important topic of protecting educational institutions. And also, of course, religious sites, I mentioned that as well. So with that, I will finish. You have also in the presentation our contact details, the webpage link where you have all this information and more. And we will be happy to, of course, engage with you. And I'm ready to answer any comments or questions that you may have. And thank you very much for your time, and to CTED colleagues for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ignacio. I think that's a comprehensive briefing presentation and a very valuable one. I really like what we are doing with the global network, the regional, sub-regional network also. I want to refer to the information sharing among member states, among beneficiaries. I think it's also a value of this program. We now have a little bit less than 20 minutes for a discussion. I know, Ignacio, you have to leave for other engagement very soon, so we'll start with questions to you. We will first take questions from member states before we open up the floor to UN partners. And we start with people in the room. If you can, every time, introduce yourself and say what mission you represent. This will help us as raising your physical hands if you want to take the floor. So let's take maybe first question from the room, from member states, if we have.
Please, thank you. Thank you, Jean-Philippe. Thank you, dear colleagues. My name is Firuz Kosimov. I'm from Mission of Tajikistan. Thank you for this opportunity for organizing this briefing, and thank you, Ignacio, for this very wonderful presentation. It covered all the questions that I had in my mind, but I would really appreciate if you could share, maybe Marie, also Jean-Philippe, also about some good practices on the national risk assessment. Have you ever facilitated or assisted any member states in conducting such a risk assessment, national risk assessment? And what would be, in your views, what would make some commonalities in the methodologies? Because the regions are different, the countries are, they have different priorities. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much again.
Ignacio, would you like to react? And maybe on our side, we can add something into that. I was thinking about our experience with Côte d'Ivoire, but maybe you have other example in mind. Sometimes we can notice very good practice in the field, and I think we should not undermine what member states are doing sometimes. But Ignacio, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jean-Philippe. And actually, your point is very much in line with what I was going to say. You know, we also learn from you, and I appreciate very much the question of the Tajik delegate, because sometimes we think that, or we may be tempted to think that one size fits all, especially from the UN perspective. We create these methodologies and actually, just offer them. I think that's important as a starting point, but everything has to be tailored. So I know, for example, in Central Asia, you have very good practices, especially on this matter of assessment and threat assessments. Of course, my colleagues from CTED will be able to comment more on where they see around the world these good practices and how they can be, let's say, leveraged for member states. What I can tell you that I think, precisely because I don't think one size fits all, the UN can provide some indication in terms of the methodology. And as I mentioned in my presentation, Anne-Maria and Jean-Philippe are doing a lot of work in bringing together different UN entities which have had in the past perhaps different, let's say, guiding principles on what the methodologies should be, to try to harmonize the UN view on, okay, these are at least the basics. And we can provide you with the basics of what would be, you know, convenient, what we have seen around the world that would be most convenient, but it's for member states to then decide, okay, this is fine, but in my country, we need to do it this way because we have this legal framework, we have this regulatory framework, or we have these operational practices that actually oblige us. What I think would be important, and I think, if I understood correctly, the Tajik delegate also, I would very much agree with the fact that it is not only important but fundamental in the area of vulnerable targets protection, okay? Because we're talking about targets. There are some technical assistance and capacity building programs that focus on the means of a delivery of a terrorist attack. But here we're talking about the receiving end, and the receiving end can be almost anything, okay? Critical infrastructure and public business is a very broad area. So it is fundamental to have that methodology tailored to the specific needs, and we can support with that. This is what we do. This is what CTED does, of course, with its recommendations, but this is also what we try to do when we facilitate the technical assistance. Okay, so I don't know if I responded. Of course, I would be happy to engage with you in a more detailed way, but as I explained before, you know, to correctly assign resources, you need to have these. This is at the basis of having a good system to protect vulnerable targets, you know, because we can't be everywhere and anywhere, you know. It's impossible for law enforcement to be everywhere and protect all. You really need to prioritize, and this is key in the vulnerable target sphere. So sorry, over to you, colleagues, because I know you in CTED have been working very much on this.
Thank you, Ignacio. Before giving the floor to the permanent mission of Nigeria, Anne-Maria, you want to add something briefly, please?
Well, very briefly, I will just say one thing, because otherwise I could talk about risk management for a week. So,
I know.
One of my favorites, Ignacio, hopefully my colleagues know this very well. Highly important, and I really appreciate you asking that. And we make continuous recommendations for states, because indeed threat assessment, risk management, two different things. We are putting together, because we get constant requests, we are drafting a risk management manual, because the methodology actually, yes, there is a methodology we can advise and provide to all member states that you can tailor to your national. But some of the components are actually like, you're either doing it or you're not. So some of those components actually, to understand what is a threat scenario, to understand what is risk assessment, and what is the entire cycle of risk management. So even risk assessment and management are two different things. So we are putting that together right now. We are working also with other partners, ICAO, for example, because there's a risk assessment, and an International Maritime Organization, because there's a risk management for sectors. So aviation sector, maritime sector. We are now kind of drawing from those examples to put together a general national level counterterrorism risk management, and then we will provide these examples of sector specific risk management, which are based on the same methodology, the same mechanism, but just what specificities states have to consider in the threat scenarios when it comes to specific sectors. So it is coming. As we are progressing, we were hoping to release it by the end of the year, but because we're kind of doing this in-house, we don't have any kind of extra resources to do the risk management. We're doing this because we see there's a huge demand. So we are trying to work as fast as we can, and then we will have it and we will offer it. Yes.
Thank you very much, Anne-Maria, and I hope we answered to your question. Now giving the floor to Mr. Ondoni, Permanent Mission of Nigeria. You have the floor, sir. We cannot
thank
hear
you.
you. Okay.
Thank you so very much for this opportunity, and thanks to UNOCT and CTED for these constant engagements. And we, as a country that is affected by a lot of these criminal activities, we are always happy to have engagements like this, because you know that at every point in time, just like in countering terrorism, no one country can do it alone. The same way, no one person can know it all. So we appreciate these engagements. And that said, let me also extend our thanks to the presenters for the insightful presentations. I just want to, I agree with all that have been said, and they brought out some very salient issues. Very interesting discourse. I want to ask a question on the last presenters talk about partnering. You want to partner. How do we go about becoming partners? For us, yes, a lot is lacking in our engagements because of some basic disadvantages that we know. But when it comes to this issue of partnerships, we are happy that institutions, entities are willing to have member countries partner. So how do we become partners? And in the area of identifying vulnerable targets, so to say, are you going to be working on the basis of national governments identifying for you, or you as an entity identifying to be able to work better with national governments? So I just wanted to have an idea on these two areas because we are sincerely interested, and we want to always work with also interested partners or interested entities and individuals so as that we bring to an end this scourge that has affected us so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And I remember the discussion we had in Abuja during the CTC CTED assessment visit on this topic. So I know it's a priority for your country. But I give the floor to Ignacio maybe to answer, since the question was addressed to you, Ignacio. Please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jean-Philippe, and thank you so much, Mr. Ndoni. I would say to become partners, I'm a bit perhaps not very much UN traditional in terms of, I do understand formalisms, but I do also understand the need for expediency. So, you know, you just have to tell us that you want to engage with the program and the way in which you want to engage with the program. If for example, you would like, I know that Nigeria has a lot of expertise, for example, on the protection of educational institutions and any other vulnerable targets on energy infrastructure protection, etc. So if you would like to, for example, become a partner to provide expertise to the program, it will be as easy as, you know, sending us an email or a note verbal. If you would like, for example, to become a beneficiary of the program, and again, when I say beneficiary, I always take it as a partnership, because it's not us telling you what to do. It's basically exchanging views on what would be the important things that need to be done. I always say the same thing, and I know Jean-Philippe also makes this point often. There's no one country in the world that has all its counterterrorism system that is perfect. Everybody needs to improve in different areas, in different ways, with different capacities. So it's more of a partnership. But if you want to become a beneficiary, the same thing, you know, probably a simple email to our email address, plus a note verbal, just to you know, put formality, because I understand that who come from capital will be enough. If you want to become a funding partner, the third modality, the same thing, okay? If you think that Nigeria will be interested in working with us in developing a specific sub-project on a thematic that will be of interest to Nigeria to support a third state, with your expertise, for example, and also with some resources, that we could also do, okay? So again, of course, I do understand. I've been working in the UN for 15 years, so I do understand very well the formalisms, but I also understand expediency. So in that regard, please just let us know and how you would like to engage, and we will be happy to put things in motion quickly. The second thing on who identifies vulnerable targets, I think it's also linked to the previous question. I think the risk assessment will give you, or the methodologies that we could provide you in terms of good practices in terms of the how to identify vulnerable targets could help you as a beneficiary member state on this identification. But it's not us that will be identifying your vulnerable targets, because of course vulnerable targets includes critical infrastructure. This is core national security. And we understand that all countries around the world have, their confidential matters related to especially to the protection of critical infrastructure. But we will give you the tools to decide how to apply them in your own assessment, risk, threat, etc. That will help you identify your vulnerable targets and list them and allocate resources. So we help you with the methodology. We help you with the technical assistance, mentorship if needed. We help you with the capacity building. Of course, even, for example, developing plans, okay? So security plans for certain vulnerable targets, we could support you with that as well. But this is my point, we are very conscious that beneficiary member states, they are the ones who need to be on the driver's seat, not us, okay? It's you know better what you need and how to make it happen, and this is very important for us. Be respectful of that.
Thank you, Ignacio, and I hope you're satisfied with the answer, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
So we don't have, for the time being, we don't have any other questions from member states. Do we have questions from UN agencies in the room and online? So if not, I really want to thank all participants for joining this in-person and online meeting. Thanks to you, Ignacio, from Madrid. Now in terms of announcement, I would like to welcome all participants to attend the Counterterrorism Committee's open briefing on CTED 20th anniversary that is going to take place on the 27th October at 10 a.m. Also, for your information, advertise participant at CTED 20th anniversary event. We will also organize a similar briefing than the one we have today, next month, today to be confirmed. But this time we will present the UNOCT Countering Terrorist Travel Program, CTTP, and I saw Christine Bradley, the head of the program, online. So this will be also a very interesting program. I invite you all to attend. So with your permission, I want to close the event, and thanks again, everybody. Have a good sunny afternoon in New York.